Welcome to the Pharma Voice Editor's Take video series, filmed live at the 2013 DIA Annual Meeting in Boston, hosted by Taryn Grome, editor of Pharma Voice. In this episode, Taryn meets with Laurie Halloran, President and CEO, Halloran Consulting Group.
Laurie, welcome to the 2013 DIA Editor's Take video program.
Thank you.
I want to ask you, where do you believe are the biggest gaps between business strategy and organizational composition and processes are for the life sciences industry?
Well, that's really focused. The answer is focused on whether it's a big company or in a small company. In a big pharma company, I think there's a reticence on taking chances. There's a hesitation on speaking up and saying that something should be done differently because there's been so much attrition and so many layoffs that people are generally, I think, afraid for their positions. So the lack of innovation, except in a few companies, is probably the biggest challenge.
Now, what about in smaller companies?
In smaller companies, it's almost always a lack of resources, meaning cash. They have to try to do as much as they possibly can with much less resources than sometimes people are used to. So I think a lot of people that work in operations in small companies are better suited to have come from small companies, or else they're usually on a much tighter budget than they're comfortable with.
Are overcoming these obstacles the same for both large and small companies?
Not really, because large companies have the heft of having the big company and all of its resources, so they can outsource. They can demand more from their outsourcing providers, whereas small companies really have challenges with even getting the attention unless they have chosen the right size outsourcing provider, in which case they can. So a lot of it really comes down to their strategy for outsourcing and their ability to actively manage and oversee that outsourced program, because let's face it, almost everybody outsources at this point.
Being an expert within this outsourcing space, what are some best practices you can provide to the companies so that they can meet their ultimate goals?
So one of the first things that we will often do is look at whether or not they actually have a strategy and whether the strategy goes across the organization, because if they don't, there's an enormous amount of waste in looking for vendors who aren't going to make sense, wasting time, wasting effort on doing proposals, etc. Then the next piece is, are they adequately overseeing their vendor without necessarily doing all the work over again, which really speaks to the resources and cost. So we'll do an assessment of whether their vendor oversight is appropriate, and then we also will do a lot of education around improving that vendor oversight so that it isn't completely redundant, but is enough so that they aren't held accountable for things that they haven't been managing. So that's really our biggest areas of focus with vendor oversight.
Question, is there, to diffuse some of these gaps or obstacles, challenges, is there a need to change the vernacular between vendor and partner? And would that go away to maybe smoothing the way forward?
It's a great question, and I think it would. I think there's a lot of history to overcome there. And that's not only on the sponsor's part, it's also on the CRO's part. CROs like to talk about being a partner, but then without a lot of direction and a lot of course correction, sometimes things can get really off track. So it's grown to be that somewhat adversarial relationship. It didn't used to be that way. So I think yes, I think there should be a call to action so that they both parties take real measurable efforts towards partnering versus vendoring.
I love that word, vendoring. That's great. Laurie, I want to thank you very much for taking a few minutes out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thank you.
Additional Editors Take videos, as well as podcasts, white papers, webinars, and more, are available in the resources area at www.pharmavoice.com.